Well, thank you for being here. My name is Zoila Copiano. I am the chair of this committee, Performance Evaluation Subcommittee. And I am also the director of Housing and Stability here at Community Action. And my favorite soup are lentils, Ecuadorian lentils. And I heard that I make them very good. um, I don't know, just popcorn. The next in my screen is Marsha.
Hi, everyone. I'm Marcia Hilly, she, her pronouns. I'm the executive director at Sequoia, and my soup's probably vegetable. So on that note, let's see. Sia, you want to go next?
Sure, I'll go next. Hi, everyone. Sia Lindstrom, City of Beaverton. Chad Stover, our new coordinator, will be joining us. So will be stepping in for me soon. So I'm just here for a little while longer. Favorite soup. I love a good chicken noodle soup, and foie gras is one of my favorites. As the weather starts to get colder, I always like a good comfort soup, and I think foie gras is one of my favorites. And I will popcorn it to Megan.
Hi, Thea. Hi, everybody. I'm Megan George from the city of Tualatin. My favorite soup is a curry cauliflower. And I'm going to go to the other Megan.
Oh, thanks, Megan. Is my sound working, y'all? Okay, good. Hi, y'all. I'm Megan Cohen. I am probably look familiar because I was at City of Beaverton, but I'm now at City of Tigard / Tualatin / Sherwood. And started on Monday. So if you have meeting requests from me, or not, I'm trying to meet with everybody in the new role. Yeah, I'm happy to be back in this space too, Catherine. My favorite soup is probably like just a chicken pho. So that's what I'm going to go with. And I will popcorn to Justin.
Good afternoon, everyone. Justin Fontenot here, he, him, his, and I am the supervisor for the access team at the county. So that's shelter, street outreach, and housing liaisons. Soup-wise, perhaps an unpopular opinion, but I don't like soup because it is just seasoned water, and that seems boring. But if I had to give an answer, I'd go with gumbo. And I'll kick that over to Kim.
Oh, I'm going to assume it's Kim Ezel. Kim Ezel, City of Tigard, Program Manager for Strategic Initiatives. And like Sia, now that Megan has joined up with Team Tigard, I will be rotating off. But it's been really great to be in this space, and I'll still serve as backup for Megan. And my favorite soup is potato leek. And I will pass it to the other Kim.
Who can go next? Who have not? Go. Lauren?
I can go. It's Rolanda.
Oh, Rolanda.
I'm Rolanda Garcia, and I'm the district manager for Oregon Department of Human Services in Washington County, and I love clam chowder.
Okay, I'll go next. Lauren Kalo, Washington County Office of Community Development. I'm here with Elise today to present on ESG. So that's why I'm here. And then also, I love all soup, but just today's choice, I'm going to pick minestrone. And I will pass it to Elise.
Hi, Elise Laubach, she, her pronouns. I'm in development for Family Promise of Tualatin Valley. And somebody already said chowder, but I'll second chowder, any chowder, all the time chowder. And I will pass it to Catherine.
Hi, I'm Catherine, Program Manager here in the Department of Housing Services with Washington County. And I actually I love making soup. In the winter on Sundays, we have family dinner every Sunday with all of the in-laws and everybody. And my favorite to make is pozole. I make a mean pozole. But my favorite to eat that somebody else has made is a good tom kha. So there you go. And I'll pass it over to you, Marcia.
I believe I already introduced myself.
Yeah.
I can go.
Okay,
I
sorry,
haven't gone
guys.
yet.
Maybe
Lindsay
okay.
Downen, she, her, VP of Quality and Impact for New Narrative, and love all soups. Really love good ramen. If that classifies as a soup,
Mm.
I'll take it as a soup.
Thank you. Ozzy, Kim, Marshall?
Hi guys, Kim Marshall, Executive Director at Project Homeless Connect. Sorry, I'm doing two things at once, but aren't we all? I think the question was soup, and I think my favorite is the zuppa toscana at Olive Garden. But I also make a really good lasagna soup in the crock pot. So. Good to see you all. This is an awesome group. We should go do something fun.
Yeah, I agree. Should try all the soups.
What do you mean? This isn't fun?
Oh, yeah.
Sean, I think you're the last one. Oh, and Nadia.
Hello. Sean Cardwell, Executive Director for the Forest Grove Foundation. I don't think soups really matter. It really is about the bread, isn't it? I mean, let's get real. The bread is what makes the soup.
Nadia?
Hi all, I was just typing a message to you all there. I'm Nadia Mohammed. I'm the Advisory Bodies Coordinator at the Homeless Services Division here. My favorite soup, I mean, it sounds pretty boring, but I do really like a good potato leek soup. And I tend to make it lower carb, so I add cauliflower to it. I don't know, it's just, and I like making soup too. I love cooking, and in this kind of weather, making soup is great. My message that in case some of you aren't paying attention to the chat, is Kim was speaking of doing something fun together. In December, we are planning to do a luncheon, so it'll include performance evaluation, Solutions Council, the Resident Advisory Body Board, and HAC. And so I hope you can all attend, and I'll be sending something out, an email about that. That's all. Is everyone? Oh, Meredith.
Hi, my name is Meredith Cook, Administrative Assistant for Homeless Services, Washington County, she, her pronouns, and my favorite soup is like a nice spiced fall squash soup. Okay, I think it's all everybody, so pass it back to Zoe.
Nicole and Carly, I think, are...
Oh, Carly.
I can go next. Hi, everybody. I'm Carly Brandini, she, her pronouns, and my quality improvement coordinator with Washington County. And my favorite soup is a sausage, kale, and potato soup.
Thank you, Carly. And Nicole?
And hey folks, sorry to be in the car and not on camera. Nicole Sting, she, her pronouns, Strategic Initiatives Relations Manager for the Homeless Services Division. I'm very similar to Mara. My favorite soup is a curried butternut squash soup.
Thank you and welcome. So let's move on. Have a packed agenda. And next we have a presentation from Family Promise and the Emergency Solutions Grant outcomes. Lauren?
Yeah, so just really quickly, I guess I'll just give like an overview. So each year we are supposed to report back to the COC on ESG performance outcome measures. And so our ESG program was on hold for about a year and a half. So we haven't done it in a while. And now we're doing it in this new space with the different subcommittees and all that. So this is why we're bringing it to you. So I'm going to just hand it over to Elise to do the presentation. And then if anyone has comments or questions, I think we're happy to answer those.
Thank you, Lauren. I want to just check how familiar, I don't want to waste people's time or tell you information you already know. Is this group familiar with the ESG program and what it involves? I'm seeing not much nodding, a few nodding, a little bit of so-and-so. Okay. All right. I'll give a little tiny bit of overview then. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to attempt to share my screen. First, I have to do that after I do the presentation, after I share the screen. Okay, there we go. We seeing it? Yes, no, maybe so. Okay, fantastic. So just a little bit about us, Family Promise of Tualatin Valley. We've been serving clients since 2019. We've had a lot of big changes since then. We're now at about a staff of 40, two specifically focused on eviction prevention. Through Project Turnkey funding, a statewide initiative and partnership with Washington County and the city of Tigard, we were able to purchase a hotel to use as a 70-room shelter in Tigard and for all of our office spaces. And we do have and have had for quite some time a dedicated eviction prevention program that's funded through a combination of government funding, private funding, and grants and foundations. So the way ESG works is this time it was focused on this homelessness prevention. So it was set up so that we would get a referral through Community Connect, HMIS, and then there was a kind of a laundry list of things that folks could be eligible for. So there was short-term, medium-term rental assist, utility arrears, and also relocation assistance. So, you know, there were a variety of circumstances coming in where someone might have already received an eviction notice, and we were looking to get them into new housing quickly. And other times they were in their housing, but behind or unable to pay going forward. And so that's it's kind of the variety of things. And then the case manager was involved in just sort of verifying that it was a habitable place, that it was within fair market rate. And there was a specific requirement that clients be below 30% of the area mean income. And so that was some of the qualifying things for this particular program. Okay, so our activities in this program, our service target was 86 households. And we set the service target by projecting a spread of support needs based on previous funding. So we estimated that a percentage of households would only need arrears to stabilize. We've had a funding through something called EFSP, Emergency Food and Shelter Program, that was kind of pointed at arrears. So we assumed some would only need a chunk of arrears to stabilize. And then we also estimated a portion that would need short-term rental assistance and a portion that would need more medium-term rental assistance, which was that up to 2 years option. And it turns out that only 25 households were assisted with this program. And the reason for that is that every household we encountered needed the full medium-term rental assistance. So many of them had some arrears. Many of them were struggling to also pay utilities, and all of them benefited from the full 2 years of assistance. So instead of having what we assumed would be a handful more of sort of transactional engagements to balance with some of the more longer term rental assist, it turned out to be sort of all of that. And so that breaks down. Also, one of our goals was kind of to transition people to being on their own and to get folks paying their own rent. So we have 8 households of that 25 who have transitioned to paying their own rent. 4 incomed out. So what that means is if they go above 30% income, that's not a word. I don't know where that apostrophe came from. But anyways, if they go above 30% income, they don't qualify for this program, but many of them are not necessarily able to pay. And then we did have a few who were exited for various reasons. So that's kind of the overview of it. Definitely wasn't what we expected, and there were some challenges in kind of administering that. So I also wanted to go through the performance objectives that kind of came with this funding. And there was this lovely grid that Lauren had given us at the beginning of the grant and then reminded me of again. And so these are the major points kind of in that grid. So from HUD, the performance objective was decent housing and affordability. Decent housing, achievable. Affordability, not so much. Because the assistance was based on fair market rate, that was all well and good to find someone housing within that category, but then for them to be able to continue to pay that on their own, fair market rate is often far above what people can afford. Performance standard reduction in new instances. My Zoom thing is above me, reduced return and remained housed after 6 months. So we don't have any data on remaining housed after 6 months because we've been supporting people for the duration of this grant. For those 25 households, we did reduce incidence of homelessness or returning to homelessness. So those were the HUD standards. There was something called opening doors, and that the goal there was to improve access to mainstream services. Part of case management support is making sure that they're aware of other long-term programs or rental supports. And then, of course, we also did a ton of resource referrals, warm handoffs. We have bilingual case managers, so they could support in that way. Translation services for other languages. And one of the challenges with that is, I think at the beginning, we had this idea that we would get people on this program, and then for the folks who were unlikely to be able to pick it up and do it on their own, we would make referrals or transition them to some other rental assistance programs. And the challenge with that was that while they were housed, they remained a low priority to qualify for other programs. So we were unable to do those kind of direct handoffs. So as this program is winding down and our funding will be sunsetting, we'll keep up by making those referrals, by connecting with those folks to see if we can then transition them, if they're unable to continue to pay their rent, to see if we can transition them now that they're more at risk to one of these other programs. But it's not quite what we'd hoped. And then the road home goals were preventing homelessness. So yes, check for the duration of the funding. The consolidated plan was providing rental support, housing navigation, case management. So housing navigation was utilized most when there was an eviction involved and people had to relocate to somewhere else. And then referrals was interesting because we were able to provide those for both people who qualified and people who didn't qualify. So that was just something we provided. If someone called in and they didn't meet the criteria for this specific program, the case manager would still stay with them and refer them to other things, and again, provide that warm handoff whenever possible. So those were kind of the grading criteria or the goal criteria. I'm going to stop sharing for a second and see if you have any questions. Oops, that's not it. Let's share. There we go.
We can still see your screen.
Oh, all right. Stop sharing. There we go.
I just want to follow up on some of the stuff Elise said. We came to you, or I came to you a couple months ago, I believe it was this council, to talk about the future direction, right? So we decided on putting the funds towards rapid rehousing for the next year. And so for the current year and the next year. And so that's why, we're running into this problem of these people that qualified for 2 years of assistance that are now going to drop off and we have nowhere to send them. And so we will take any ideas from you all. If there's a program, I think we tried connecting with, SHS trying to see, but we're running into that barrier of them. Well, they don't have an eviction notice. So we're letting them get to that point of about to be evicted to then be able to come in and help, which is it's really unfortunate. So we're hoping to find something to bridge that gap. So they're not, I think, Elise, you said you're going to run out after December rent for those households. So it'll be right in the middle of winter.
At this point, we're looking at January. We looked at our numbers again, and Family Promise has also been awarded a grant through Home ARP for services that can provide rental arrears and up to 1 month of rental assistance, which isn't a lot. But you know, we can kind of roll those families and give them that 1 more month, or they can kind of take a chance and let it ride, and then we could pay a couple months arrears. We do have case management. Lauren, you and I hadn't had this conversation yet, but we do have more case management dollars than we have rental assist dollars left in the grant. And so we'll probably use that to try and transition these folks to other programs as they are unable to continue with this funding. But again, it is tricky because without an eviction notice, without being literally homeless, even though they know they won't be able to afford the rent going forward, it's hard to connect them. You know, just for example, we have a lot of folks who are employed, but still not making enough to pay rent that's a fair market rate in our area. And you'll have an example where there's, you know, two adults and 3 kids. The kids are under school age, so therefore one of the parents can't work, or they have to figure out some sort of childcare. And so you have one person working, and it's just insufficient. I mean, I'm kind of preaching to the choir here. You guys know these issues for sure. But that's just sort of an example. We've thought as we went into this, like, we'll have to just, you know, see, is anybody going to benefit from ongoing assistance, or will it really be more transactional? And so far, everyone with that below 30% area mean income really needed that ongoing support. Questions? Ideas? Not going to solve homelessness today in this meeting? No? Okay.
Thank you, Elise. Thank you, Lauren.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Feel free to reach out if any comments or questions come up too.
I mean, I'll just share that this is a common conversation with rapid rehousing programs as well, that have that same 24-month hard stop, as well as all of the households that we see coming through coordinated entry. And we're actually, this is such a perfect transition, because we'll actually talk about the prioritization and the mismatch between supply and demand for housing programs within our system. And just acknowledge that, yeah, this is a significant challenge. And Lauren, as you all are entering the consolidated plan process, just recognizing the number of households that are in that 0 to 30% AMI income bracket that are extremely housing cost burdened, and just the number of households even up to 80% AMI that are extremely housing cost burdened, and trying to get to a point within the homeless services system about how we identify what can we do in an environment in which there are far more households that need housing subsidies than there are housing subsidies available, and what are the options for those households. And I will put a link in the chat here, I think. No, that's the wrong link. There is a like an affordable housing locator website that OHCS puts out that helps identify where are there apartments that are kind of lower than market rate that households may be able to sustain on their own at very low incomes. So I'll put that in the chat for you, Elise, as well.
Yeah, and we work with a number of facilities. I mean, the low income housing is a competitive sport, right? So, you know, trying to get folks in and trying to get that timing going, it can be tricky for sure, but that is it's a good solution.
Thank you. You know, we're all housing providers, service providers, or navigate the issue of affordability, unfortunately, with the people that we serve. Thank you for your good presentation. And now we have coordinated entry clocks. Catherine.
Okay. This is a bit of a tag team. So Justin is here as well. And we are, this is a part of kind of our ongoing conversation around shelter long stayers. So as you all may remember, this group began as our MAC group in response to the executive orders, the governor's executive orders in 2020. Was it only 2023? It feels like it's been a lot longer than that. But yeah, so this group started as a response to the executive orders that were intended to be a specific focus on reducing unsheltered homelessness. As a result, we expanded shelter capacity in our system, we actually added, I think, 90 new beds total, but 60 of them supported specifically by the governor's investments, and extended all of our winter shelters to year round, and we're maintaining that capacity now. And we're fairly successful in having families or individuals and families moving off the street and into our shelter beds through our L3C, LC3 process that we spent a lot of our early time talking through. And one of the challenges that we've highlighted frequently since the beginning is just the length of stay in our shelter and what that means in terms of our ability to actually have adequate capacity, and generally just understanding that emergency shelter requires a certain amount of flow through, because there is no way that we could successfully build enough shelter beds for those to become kind of permanent or long-term housing situations for all of those individuals. There needs to be some movement through that emergency shelter system in order for it to function as an emergency shelter system. Is there anything that I said there that was confusing or doesn't track with y'all's understanding of where we've been? No. Okay, cool. So what we're here today, so we're starting to kind of walk through this newly formulated performance evaluation subcommittee that has kind of a role within our continuum of care governance structure to look at our system performance metrics and our system performance generally and provide kind of feedback. And starting with our one of the primary concerns that you all have raised and that we have talked about before is coordinated entry and our shelter system, and where are we not seeing the adequate flow through to achieve our objectives. So that's kind of the framing what we're here to discuss today. I have a presentation, and I'm gonna share my screen, and again, I'm going to do it the cheaty way and click through the slides rather than going into presenter mode, because I don't know how to do that and also see you guys at the same time. Oh, am I sharing just my? I'm sharing the wrong screen. Hold on a second. Now, am I sharing the right one? No, still the wrong one. Sorry, y'all. This is a little embarrassing.
I'm seeing the presentation when you share.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
Oh. Okay. Well, cool. I'm just going to go with that then, because it says it's sharing my other. I have 3 screens going here. Okay. So you're seeing the coordinated entry shelter long stays presentation.
Yep, that's what I see.
Okay, good. Good. All right. So little bit of framing. What is a shelter long stayer? So our system has defined a shelter long stayer as anyone who's been in a shelter bed for more than 100 days consecutively. And that's just kind of generally based on our long-term system average length of stay. HUD's goal is actually to be at a 30-day stay. Yeah, and so we've got a lot of ground to cover to get to that point. And what we're seeing in our system right now is we have, as of today, 335 individuals enrolled in shelter. That's households, not individuals. So some of those are 2 or 3 or 5 person households. So units and beds don't exactly match up. It's just a caveat there. Of those, 169 of those households have been in shelter for more than 100 days. And of those 169 long stayer households, 67 have a current housing program enrollment. And so what that means is that of all of the shelter enrolled households, 50% have reached shelter long stayer status. So they've been in their bed for more than 100 days. Of all of the long stayers, 40% have a housing program enrollment. And across the system, 20% of our shelter enrolled households have a housing program enrollment. And so our goal here today is to talk about why that is, what's happening there, and what adjustments, what might we need to be looking at or measuring or doing differently to change how that's working.
Catherine?
Yes.
Are we allowed to ask questions?
Yes.
Can you go back to the last slide, please?
Yes.
Is for this scenario, is enrollment different than referral? And would you have referral numbers by any chance?
The number of households that have a pending housing program referral?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, we do have that. It's a lot. The challenge isn't necessarily, so that is, thank you for asking that question, Kim. Actually, that's a really good question. So initially, at one point, our concern was that folks were in shelter and they weren't receiving phase 1 assessments, and they weren't getting housing referrals. And now we are doing, as a system, the shelter system is doing an excellent job with making sure households are getting their phase 1 assessments and that they're getting housing referrals. And so we're really kind of honing in on what is a supply and demand issue. Did that answer your question, Kim?
Perfectly.
Great. Okay. So here's what we're seeing. So this is our current, I hope y'all can see that okay, our current system capacity and wait list. So essentially what this means is for our HCMS programs, our longer term programs, there are 30 referrals pending as of today. We've got, such a small sliver of open slots that it doesn't even, the number doesn't even show up. And 101 of those slots are held. And what that means is the provider either hasn't hired up the staffing to receive the referrals, or we're in the midst of kind of a contractual change, and households need to be transferred into a retention caseload in order to free up those those referral slots. So basically what this means is that our programs are enrolled, the available capacity is being utilized, and there are still 541 households with a pending referral. And then for rapid rehousing, it's very similar. There are 43 pending referrals to a program. So these are folks where a program has been identified and they've been referred to that program specifically, and the provider is in the process of working with them. 362 households currently enrolled, and there is a very significant list of households, again, waiting for those referrals. So this is this area over here in these little tan boxes. This is where folks who are in shelter right now, who have a pending referral are. They are in this queue here. Oftentimes, and we even have it here on our dashboards, We consider coordinated entry as a wait list. It doesn't actually, many of you know this, doesn't actually function that way. It's prioritized, so you don't get in line based on time and date stamp. The line is perpetually moving. So somebody who gets on the list today, if they are identified as being at a higher level of acuity than someone who got on the list 6 months ago, that person who got on the list today would go first to the next available housing referral. That's our process called dynamic prioritization.
Hey, Catherine, can you remind me what ERRH stands for on the last slide?
Yes, thank you. Rapid rehousing.
Thanks.
So that's the 24, that's a intermediate term housing intervention is what we would consider it. It's 24 months of rent assistance plus support services.
Catherine,
Yep.
when we're talking about the shelter folks, so that includes congregate, non-congregate. Does it also include pods?
Yes, it is all of our shelter types. Yes.
Okay, cool.
So we do coordinated entry prioritization for both shelter and housing programs. So for our shelter programs, we're prioritizing those who are currently unsheltered, those who are enrolled in our LC3 kind of outreach enhanced connections process, which you all should be fairly familiar with, but please stop me if you need me to fill in any gaps. We had been prioritizing folks who were enrolled in a housing program if they met that they were also unsheltered and they were engaging with LC3 and they had a housing program enrollment. The thought process behind that was that they would be able then to move through that shelter placement more quickly and free up, have more flow through. Where they're also prioritized if they are over 55, medically fragile, like having a medical or a judicial discharge, the length of time that they've been outside, and then how long they've been out of medical or judicial. I'll pause there if anybody has any questions, or Justin, if you have anything you want to clarify there. No, okay.
I have one clarifying. Sorry. Are these?
Sure, yeah, of course.
When looking at the priority, like, are these weighted equally, or is it sort of like in order as we look down the list? I'm just thinking, like, if we have somebody who's 55 years old who's been chronically homeless, as soon as they become, you spoke to this a little bit, but as soon as they become sheltered, they basically immediately move down the prioritization list, even if.
Well, this is the prioritization just for shelter.
Okay.
So we always prioritize, like, first priority is they're outside. There are lots of people who are outside. So the next is they're actively engaging with our outreach and trying to get into shelter. The next one down is that they are, they're outside, they're actively engaging, and they're enrolled in a housing program. Then they're 55. So it's kind of like a layered, like a parfait.
Okay.
Sorry, I gotta make jokes, otherwise this is a really sad conversation. So I hope you all don't mind. Not being glib or in any way, not saying that this is a serious and really overwhelming issue. Just a coping mechanism. So this is how we prioritize for emergency shelter. And then we also have a similar process for housing programs. So chronically homeless or literally homeless includes folks who are in shelter. So by virtue of the fact that someone has already been prioritized for shelter and is in shelter, they're kind of already towards the top of the housing prioritization list. And then we also have layers for household type. So families with children that are chronically homeless or literally homeless or at imminent risk of chronic homelessness based on a history of chronic homelessness, those households would be prioritized first. So again, this is layered, and these are the prioritization for all of the different housing types are fairly similar. There's just some gradations based on whether someone is literally homeless, meets the chronically homeless definition, or is at imminent risk. And then we always, families with children go first, then TAY, and then the adult population. And so as you may imagine, our adult population is the largest population that is currently outside. We do have some ability to manage for that on the supply side. Like some programs only serve families with children. Many of our programs only serve adults.
What is a transitional age youth?
Oh, that's 18 to 25. We have a youth
Sometimes
program.
it's 22. It depends, like if there's a state appointed guardian, DHS involvement, foster care exits. But yeah, typically I think like maybe up to 24.
Yeah, I think enter by 24, they can, it depends on so we have a handful of different TAE focused funding streams that allow different levels. Thank you, Lindsay. Okay, all of that make about as much sense as it can in a moment. Okay, great.
Wait, actually, I have one quick question, Catherine, and maybe you're going to get to this. Do you happen to have numbers for each of those primary prioritization groups?
We can get that. When I looked this morning, there were 12 families, 5 TAE, and then like a really, really long list of adults over 55 and adults. And but we do have that. We track it. It's
just interesting. I mean, if that family is only 12, but 12 out of like 250, yeah, it's just interesting thinking about the levers to pull to maximize utilization.
Excellent. So families with children and TAE that meet the chronically homeless definition move through pretty quickly. Is kind of the way that plays out in real life. Okay. So that is kind of one side of the equation. The other place that we are trying to drive outcomes is through our metrics and our contracts. So the shelter outcome metrics, I'm going to hand them over to Justin. So Justin's going to walk you through this part.
All right. So briefly, we'll go over the metrics for the 3 access programs, and then I'll tell you what we're seeing and doing with our long stayer reports and case conferencing, and then we'll have some questions at the end. So for the sake of time, I'll try to go through the metrics both slowly and fast for the sake of absorption. And so for our shelters here, this would be all types of shelters. We are looking at a 90% occupancy rate. So at any given day, 90% of the beds or more are filled. Next, we have a 75% goal of households exiting from the shelter to a positive or neutral destination. A positive destination would be like their own house with a lease. They're getting a rental there. Or a neutral destination could be an additional shelter, like a transfer, or moving in with a family member or a friend to temporarily interrupt the homelessness. Next, we have a 90% data quality rating based off of the county's data quality plan. I think that one might be a little bit outside of the conversation we're having here. Next would be that all of the data would be entered within HMIS within 3 days. So when you get a new person in the shelter, they would be enrolled in the program within 3 business days. And then lastly, kind of like the whole topic here is the average length of stay being less than 100 days for folks, which we're not, as Catherine has mentioned earlier, we're not really knocking that one out of the park with 50% of our folks into long stayer territory. We can go to the liaisons next. For the liaisons, we're looking at both the housing liaisons here for these metrics and the shelter liaisons. However, for the purpose of this conversation, we're really focused on the shelter liaison side of things, which comes into play on the second metric. So here we are looking for 100% of households on a liaison's caseload to be engaged in a diversionary conversation. So what that means here is with short-term solutions, with that neutral outcome of diverting the homelessness to a family member or friend's place, just having that conversation meets the mark here. So have the conversation regardless of the outcome with everyone in the shelter. The second one here, 100% of folks need to have a phase 1 assessment. And then within that, and this gets a little tricky, but focusing on the shelter side of things, within that 30% of the shelter caseload needs to have an actual outcome from those short-term solutions or diversionary conversations. Either that, or they need to be connected to a short, medium, or long-term referral. So that's kind of a twofer there. You need the phase 1 assessment, and 30% of the individuals need to have a successful diversionary or short-term solutions intervention. The next metric here is simply the programs creating a case conferencing structure. Depending on the uniqueness of their program, they might need to case conference about participants 2 to 4 times a month. And then lastly, 80% of the households that are in engagement need to have at least 2 service transactions per month. Those service transactions can be incredibly detailed, or it could be like, I wasn't able to make contact with the person today. So there's really no quality there. It's like, give us something, but like, even if you don't have a successful attempt, that counts as one of those service transactions if you document it. And then over to street outreach. And for street outreach, we have 85% of the households are connected to a housing resource. And obvious easy way there is through the Community Connect side of things. 70% of the exits need to be to a positive or neutral destination or to a shelter. That's pretty much the same as with the liaisons there. Positive and neutral means the same thing. Third, we have 90% of the households in engagement have the 2 service transactions similar to the liaison. And then lastly, the data timeliness of having folks entered into HMIS within 3 business days. So those are current metrics for the 24-25 fiscal year. And so with that being said, we can now transition to what I am seeing with the team from our long stay or case conferencing efforts. And so with that case conferencing, honestly, the clearest thing is day here is that whenever a shelter program does not have a shelter liaison, they have a vacancy for whatever reason, that tends to slow down the process and they end up having more long stayers simply because like that vacancy is there and someone's not there to do the work. Makes all the sense in the world. But that is certainly a glaring situation when we have multiple shelters with a shelter liaison vacancy. Next, one thing that we're identifying and a philosophy that we're changing, especially with this case conferencing, is we're hearing a lot about the expectations and intentions of some participants. And it seems that some of the expectations are that shelter is the endpoint. Like I was on the street, I got into shelter, box check, I won, as opposed to looking at the housing placement at the end as the endpoint. That's not a super widespread one, but it is certainly something that we have identified. And I can see engaging in this case conferencing and having the program staff engage with folks is kind of increasing the accountability in the sense of like you're being asked over and over and over again throughout the months, what's the plan in progress here? That's slowly starting to showcase that, you know, we have to have a placement after the shelter. Looking at a snapshot for the month of August, we can see that within 1 month of a long stayer being enrolled in a housing program, just 1 month, 27% of the long stayers have either been housed, have a move-in date, or have identified a unit and are awaiting for that unit inspection. And so 27% in 1 month having that quick of progress is pretty telling to the dynamics and the progress that we're having in the long stayer case conferencing. Also, as any case conferencing model operates, it's allowing for the providers to have a space to share their best practices, their resources, little known things that one provider knows that a newer or different provider doesn't know. So just sharing that pool of resources is helping everything move much, much faster along. And then a couple of additional barriers that we have either identified or are continuing to resolve is that a lot of the participants are struggling getting the documentation needed for the ARLA voucher. Some of them do have criminal histories or eviction histories that are posing to be very, very difficult to overcome with landlords. And some of them, some of the participants that we're identifying are experiencing a barrier to their progress based off of their preferences, whether that's a situation where the participant is waiting for a household member to get out of jail and doesn't want to do any progress until that happens. If there's a high barrier of preference in terms of like where you're going to live or how many bedrooms, et cetera, navigating that with a participant is a challenge that we are overcoming as well. And then the next slide, please. And so on the housing liaison side of things, particularly the shelter liaisons, they are offering some very, very critical support to the long stayer process and helping it move along. They themselves are deepening their understanding of the ARLA process and the documentation needed, as well as all of the needs of other housing programs that they can help participants with should they be lower on the prioritization for those housing programs. Given the wait list that we just saw, it might take a very long time, if ever, for somebody to get connected to a housing program. We need the shelter liaisons to then fill in that space and offer the support, since it's the housing program is going to come much later down the road, if at all. And so with that understanding of the housing programs, the liaisons themselves can start to coordinate all of that documentation to whenever the housing program does come along, participants are ready to go with the documentation, and it's just like that. We've also sped up the processing time of our ARLA applications, which was a significant barrier to folks getting housed as well, just waiting to hear that they are approved and have received the voucher was taking a long time. And so then again, with the shelter housing liaison, considering that a bulk of people do not have a housing program there, and in the case conferencing, we're focusing on the folks who do have the housing program. Honestly, we're identifying a need to have an additional case conferencing structure just for the people who do not have a housing program, because we're talking about the ones who do regularly, and looking at the notes, folks without a housing program haven't even been talked about in the last month because we don't have time. So we need another meeting. And I think for the sake of time, I'll stop there, since we have some questions that we would like you to consider on the next page. And so these are our discussion questions as we wrap up here. I know we only have 5 minutes, and so if you want to email us some thoughts and considerations at the tail end of things after the meeting, that would be appreciated as well. But looking at those questions, giving you all a moment to churn, any of those questions stick out to you as having anything to contribute here? Lindsay?
Maybe this is a general question for the entire group, because I think recognizing what's needed makes a lot of sense. But I am curious if anybody is just frankly overhiring, because knowing that the staffing is such an implication for connectivity back to referrals and other process. And then if we're going to be needing to look for additional meeting times for subgroup and involvement. And I know that that's something that we're trying to evaluate, is how, when we have open positions, can we almost be building capacity into contracts to have redundancies or backups or better contingency planning because of the negative impact it has on performance metrics and data reporting. Just putting that out there, because QAP positions are also not without folks being out for extended periods of time or having turnover.
Yeah. So for my programs, I haven't heard of any like overhiring, because yeah, quite frankly, we're kind of locked into the number of positions that folks have available for this particular fiscal year. Depending on budgetary situations, I could see that possibly being a consideration in the future, should that data or should that funding manifest itself accordingly. But especially for the other programs, I'm not sure. Catherine, do you know?
I would imagine it's similar, so it would have to fit within the budget, and the pay rate has to be enough to retain those staff. Otherwise, you just perpetuate the churn. So I think that's an amazing concept and solution for all of the providers. I'm not sure if anyone has been able to actualize that. If that's something that y'all are working on, that would be interesting to hear how
I
it's
mean,
working.
candidly, we are, and we're happy to have conversations with other providers around our wage variance, because open positions, we have wage savings. And so we're looking at, do we invest that into wage increases or additional FTE? Trying to, again, how do we best build out the redundancy?
Yeah.
And, hearing that question, one thing that does come to mind, a fear, a concern that I've had when just like engaging with this material is like, a lot of staff are saying that it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to do the work that we were doing months ago, and now we're doing things differently, adding even more work onto their plate, expecting them to also keep up doing the exact same things from before. So yeah, that is a sticky place to be, because resources and energy doesn't really work that way. So yeah, that is certainly something in my mind. I just don't know of routes of a solution just yet.
I'm desperately trying to raise my hand. So here it is.
We can see it.
Thanks. So Lindsay, absolutely. So what we ended up doing is building a peer support program, and utilizing them in multiple ways, just to be a support sometimes for staff members or case managers, because the workload is too heavy. And in other times it's just client-based, trying to do some behavioral health stuff, because the addictions and mental health piece is such a huge gap. We're putting people into housing who aren't ready to be housed, and then going, cool, see you in a month. So that was the solution that we came up with at Project Homeless Connect, was to build a peer support program to the best of our ability to have those supports in multiple ways.
And is peer support Medicaid billable?
If they're credentialed, yes, as traditional health workers.
Correct. Which is another piece to the conversation. Well, most of you know me well enough. I'll be transparent. We've been utilizing our shelter contract, which is a fee-for-service contract, to be able to adjust our budget and fund these positions because because the need was so high, we had to figure something out.
Well, and I will be transparent and add to this that we are trying to determine, can some of our credentialed folks also now bill HSRN funds to get that additional fee for service rate within our contracts to create budget opportunity for staffing?
Exactly.
That's great. So yeah, that's such an interesting conundrum, like the balance between you have to have people to do the work, and having the people to do the work makes a huge difference in terms of actually getting folks to move through the system, and also there has to be the housing on the other end. So where do we as a system prioritize our investments? And then where else can we leverage? I think that's one of the questions, is what other systems should we be leveraging to help us make sure that we can do the thing? Rolanda, please, and I know we're at time, so we'll
Just a quick question. When you're working with families, are we asking them if DHS, do they have a family coach and SSB, and are they working with someone? Because I think you can leverage some of the help from engaging with our family coaches to be able to work with families on how they can help, so it doesn't always have to be your resources. And I'm wondering how often we're asking those questions, and then maybe creating some sort of staffing to bring those family coaches into those discussions to help these families access quicker money or whatever it is that they may need, because with some of our funding streams that we're bringing down, they may be able to get some assistance. So if they have any, I mean, we work with community action, obviously, but I think bringing in our family coaches would be very helpful if they have them. Just the thought.
No, that's great, Rolanda. And I think the answer to that is it depends on the organization. So like obviously community actions, family program is very well connected with DHS. And so that probably happens. And then there may be others where there's less connectivity between the two. So, but thank you for flagging that. I think that is a great system leverage, and maybe an additional outcome metric that we could include to make sure that folks are, especially families, getting connected to those mainstream resources.
Family coaches are on the SSP side. Okay.
I mean,
Okay.
I would assume, that's a better approach than child welfare, so.
Yeah, probably more universal. Okay, great. Thank you so much. I know that was a quick discussion. We'll send out all of these materials, and please send any additional thoughts you all have. And then Megan, I see your questions in the chat, and we'll get answers out to you by the end of the week, which is the day after tomorrow.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Have a great rest of your week.